Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Iron Kaiser Gaming, and welcome to the Kaiser News Network. As in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of information that has come out within the last week or so in the world of strategy gaming. Games that I think you guys might have an interest in. So buckle in because we've got a lot to talk about. First of all, I want to share with you the existence of a brand new game, Heroes of Might and Magic, the Olden Era. This is a turn-based 4X strategy game based in the Heroes of Might and Magic world, obviously. But more specifically, it is seeking to be kind of a throwback to Heroes of Might and Magic 3, which I have heard is one of the all-time classic 4X fantasy turn-based strategy games. I personally am not very familiar with the Heroes of Might and Magic world, but I know that it is a very popular game, and it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of my audience really enjoyed those games and would be interested in this new strategy game. So let me know in the comments below if this is the kind of game that maybe I should keep an eye on. I have a link in the description to the trailer that has come out for this game, so check that out and let me know what you think. Next, we've got to talk about Age of Mythology, as info has finally come out about the Freyr God Pack. This is the first DLC that's associated with Age of Mythology Retold. It is free, or it's a part of the package that came for those of us who bought the Age of Mythology Retold Premium Edition. And we weren't entirely sure what that meant. Is it just going to be Freyr as a new god option? Is he a minor god, a major god? And what we've discovered is that Freyr is a major god, but is actually bringing a host of minor gods in tow. So you can check out the page here on the Age of Mythology fandom, link to get the info. You can also check out the Steam page is up and it'll give you this info. But we see that Freyr is a major god who has sort of more of a focus on defense and technology, which distinguishes him from the other three Norse gods. From what I understand of the meta, the other three major gods are more aggressive, they're more offensively focused. So Freyr is going to be your choice if you want to play the Norse in more of a turtly, defensive kind of way. You have the minor gods, Ullr, Aegir, and Vidar, which all have their own, of course, powers and myth units. Ullr is also a very strong defensive option, so you're kind of doubling down what Freyr can do. And if I'm remembering correctly, Aegir is kind of like that as well. He's got to focus on myth units and siege weapons. So I'm guessing, but if you were to play all of these gods back-to-back in a game, Freyr and Ullr team up for that defensive playstyle, that economic playstyle, and then Aegir you use to buff up your siege weapons. Maybe you can do a slow grind on your opponent, just destroy him. Where finally Vidar comes in with Inferno and the myth unit Fafnir, the infamous wingless dragon of Norse legend who envelops enemies in fire and fumes. Just bringing in maybe that strong hitting punch in the late game. So it seems like a really cool set of gods. I can't wait to play with them in the game. That should be really fun to explore and check out. We've also seen they've released a kind of a roadmap for what Age of Mythology Retold will look like after release. So we can see that we're getting the game for advanced access. Those of us who, again, got the premium edition will get access to the game on the 27th. Standard release is September 4th. Freyr should be coming at launch along with the Legacy God Packs, all of this stuff, which is fantastic. The thing that I want to highlight, and I'm so excited to explore, is the Arena of the Gods. I have no idea what this means, but it is some kind of brand new way of playing the game. It can be played either in single player or co-op, and that's really the big thing for me, is that whatever this mode is, it's a new way of bringing in a co-op experience. And that is something that I've seen other strategy games do exceedingly well, and it's something Age of Empires is really missing, are these new ways of doing co-op. What I have heard bantered about is maybe it's something like the StarCraft 2 Commander mode, or maybe it's something like the Dawn of War 2 Hero mode, where you control an individual hero fighting off hordes of waves of enemy attacks. If it's either one of those, I'm going to be really excited. I get the feeling, just get this vibe, whatever it is, the Arena of the Gods is going to be a very cool thing. We've also got El Renato coming up, which should be a really exciting showcase of Age of Mythology at its pro play potential. So that should be really fun. Expansion 1 in the near future, and then expansion 2 further out into the more distant future. So really looking forward to that. Also, one last thing, in the Age of Mythology world, we actually have brand new portraits. If you've been connected into the Age of Mythology community in the lead up to release, you know that maybe the one point of controversy surrounding the game were the god portraits. Many people argue that they were AI created, that there were a lot of inconsistencies about how they were drawn, and Microsoft has apparently taken that criticism to heart because they've gone back and completely redone the god portraits. So here, these are the major gods. I will flip through them. My thanks to Popo33 here for sharing these. We only have, really up close shots because this is tied into the El Renato thing. But they look really cool in my opinion. I would say overall these are an upgrade over what was. So, really neat stuff. Alright. Now, what I imagine many of you clicked on this video for, the biggin, is Civilization VII has been kind of revealed in earnest. We got our first really big showcase of Civilization VII. And I want to talk with you guys a little bit first about what we see with Civ 7, and then maybe dive into my opinions surrounding the game. So, Civ 7, it is swinging for the fences. It's coming in with some big changes. Probably one of the big ones is that in Civilization 7, the game, the span of history, is now broken up into 3 eras. And these 3 eras are apparently substantial enough that you can actually play them separately. You've got the Ancient Era, the Exploration Era, which I'm assuming is kind of the Middle Ages, Renaissance Era, and then the Industrial Era, which leads up into the present day. So the game is split into 3 zones, and you can actually select one of these 3 eras to just play a whole game of in that particular era. So you can just decide to boot up an Ancient Era game and play a game through to completion, winning or losing, in the Ancient Era, or the Exploration, or the Industrial. Or, of course, you pick one large game that spans all 3 eras. As you advance through the eras, new parts of the map are going to open up as you enter into the new ages. So there's always this element of exploration as you are advancing through the game. And then what I have heard is that win conditions have been updated, and there are win conditions that are available for each age. So winning the game is going to look very different, especially, again, if you pick a particular age to play in. That'll look differently than it has in the past. There are no more barbarians. Instead, there are minor tribes that you can interact with. And those minor tribes can either become kind of like barbarians, these warring kingdoms, or they can turn into what we would consider like city-states. And you can vie for influence with them and benefit from them and ultimately incorporate them into your own empire, right, from a peaceful point of view. So minor tribes kind of come with their own. There's a lot more, I guess, focus put into the barbarians and the city-states in Civ 7. There are no more workers. Instead, you build improvements and things directly from the city. So no more workers, no more builders. There are they're navigable rivers. You can actually send ships and trade ships up and down rivers now, which is really cool. That's something the Civ fans have been looking for a long time. There are now these things called general units. I forget if they're called generals or something else, but these are general units that you can basically assign military units to, and the general serves as a single unit that sends armies up and down the map. So we're really cutting down on the micromanagement by just having one unit that you can move around, and all of these archers and swordsmen are packed into the general as he moves. Units no longer get XP, but instead the general gets XP. So as you're fighting, the general unlocks abilities and powers that boosts the strength of units surrounding the general, which is kind of an interesting thing. Speaking of leveling up, civilization leaders now have their own kind of like tech tree. They have their own traits and abilities that can be leveled up as you play the game, right? So if you're playing Hatshepsut, for example, or Augustus Caesar, they kind of have almost like I'm almost thinking like in Civ 5, like a social policy tree they have something like that now tied to the leader that you're playing as. You can upgrade your leader as you go over the course of the game. There seems to be a focus on personalities in Civilization 7. One big change, speaking about leaders and leader personalities, maybe the big change that I think is causing a lot of controversy, you either love this or hate this. Leaders and civilizations have now been decoupled. So it used to be the case that, you know, you would get Joan of Arc leading France, or you'd get George Washington leading America. Well, now they've been decoupled. So now you'll have, like in Civilization 7, you have, I think her name is Amani, and then you'll have, I'm forgetting the name of her people. Let's say we have Hatshepsut, and then we have Egypt, but those are separate. There's nothing stopping you from picking Benjamin Franklin leading the Egyptians, or Hatshepsut leading the Americans, or what have you. They're separate, and not every civ will necessarily get a leader, or not every leader will necessarily get a civ. And, this is the big deal, civilizations are now specifically tied to a particular era. So you have ancient era civilizations, exploration era civilizations, and industrial era civilizations. And as you play a full game, if you pick a game from the ancient to the modern era, then as you transition from one era into another, you have to leave behind the old civilization, the ancient era civilization that you picked, and instead must pick an exploration era civ. So that means if you're playing a full game of Civ, you can't play as the Americans. They're an industrial era civilization. Instead, you have to play an ancient era civ like the Egyptians. And when you get to that medieval age, that exploration age, you leave the Egyptians behind and you pick another civ like the Mongolians or something like that. So it's very Humankind-esque. If you played Humankind, they have sort of a similar method of civ switching as you age up. Now, it's only going to happen 3 times. Well, I guess twice, right? You get 3 different civs over the course of a game. And your civilization choices are locked in a way that makes a little bit more sense. You can only pick either civs that are geographically or historically similar to the civ you were previously playing. Like you might go from the Egyptians to the Arabians, for example. Or you would pick a civ that is linked to the leader you're playing as. So if you were playing Genghis Khan, you might go from the Egyptians to the Mongolians because you're playing Genghis. Or if the way the game is playing out, if you have a civilization with a lot of water, and a lot of fishing boats, you may advance into some sort of naval power, like the Vikings or something. I don't know. I don't know that the Vikings are even in the game, but just as an example, that's how civ switching works. So you're not just going to be wildly swinging from Rome to Australia to Timbuktu or whatever. I don't. You're not going to be just jumping across the map like that. It's going to have some sense to it. But that does mean that no longer in Civilization 7 will you be playing the Italians from the ancient era all the way up to the modern era, playing the same civ for 6,000 years of human history, right? So some people like that, some people don't. One more thing to talk about data-wise before I share my own personal opinions. The cost has been revealed too. It's up for pre-order now. The base game is $69.99 US dollars. The deluxe edition is $99.99, and the Founders Edition is $129.99. Both the deluxe edition and the Founders Edition bring in you're pre-buying new expansion packs. You're getting in new leaders, new civilizations, new civ personas that are coming in. And so that's kind of what's tied into those packages. And you can look up, again, I have a link to the gameplay video that was released, the trailer that was released for Civ 7. Those are in the description below. I'll also have a link to the Steam page so you can check out the details for those packages in the description below. Now, my own personal thoughts about Civ 7. First of all, the game itself is beautiful. I've got a couple of screenshots of the map. I think the aesthetics, for the most part, they've nailed. The game looks beautiful. The map looks gorgeous. I think it's a beautiful blend of Civilization 5 with its, I don't want to say realism. I think realistic versus cartoony is too simplistic, but Civ 5 had a sort of grandeur and a style to it that Civilization 7 is going back to, but it's coupling that with Civilization 6's vibrancy, which I think is really awesome. Looking at the land, the cities, the water, when you pull up the gameplay video or the trailer for Civ 7, and you see the windswept snow flying by the trees. It's just a gorgeous game overall. They've announced Gwendolyn Christie's going to be the narrator, and I think she's going to do a fantastic job. I was not necessarily a huge fan of Sean Bean. I know that's a minority opinion, but I think Sean Bean, maybe largely because of the script he was given, was just not my best Civ announcer. I really like Civ 5 and Civ 4, the work that was done there with those narrators. And I think Gwendolyn Christie has the voice for an excellent Civilization 7 narrator. We'll have to see if they give her a script worthy of that voice, but I think she'll do a very good job. And I also like the focus that they seem to be putting on characters, leaders, generals. A lot of the Civ competitors, like Millennia, like Humankind, one of the decisions they made that I think was a big mistake was stripping out the leader personalities. You had kind of a generic avatar in Humankind. Millennia just sort of have flags. And I think they're missing part of what makes Civilization so exciting, which are those leader personalities. There's something special about building a relationship with, Philip II, or allying with Gilgamesh, or getting nuked by Gandhi, or, that jerk, Genghis Khan, always stealing my cities. There's something about those personalities and those historical figures that makes Civ Civ. So in some ways, I think they're really focusing on the right things, and that part's really cool. I think those are exciting aspects of this new Civilization. There's also the potential, I'll give the decoupling this, there's also the potential for more leaders than normal, which I think is something a lot of Civ fans want. Like I said, we love our leaders, and being able to bring in more historical figures, especially now that there are certain nation arguments that don't have to get in the way. Like, does Charlemagne lead the French or the Germans or his own Frankish or Holy Roman Empire civilization? You don't have to worry about that now. Just put Charlemagne in, and he can lead whoever the player wants him to lead, right? So I think that's pretty cool. On the flip side, there are maybe some cons. For one, I want to talk about the leaders themselves. Right now, there are some strengths. I've got a screenshot here of Benjamin Franklin getting into a little bit of a fight here with Ashoka of the Marians. And on the one hand, they're moving toward a less, again, in my personal opinion, Civ 6 was a little bit goofy, a little bit too far into the sort of the Disney cartoony approach. And Civilization 7 is moving away from that, which I think is a good thing. But on the other hand, there's some X factor that's missing here. What I've seen in the trailers and the screenshots of the leaders just kind of it doesn't really work for me. I feel like we're missing something. And I'm not entirely sure what it is. I think it feels a little empty looking at the diplomacy screen and just having the two figures pop up and sort of gesticulate at each other. I honestly think what a part of it is the lack of a backdrop. In Civilization 5, whenever you would interact with the leader, you kind of stepped into their throne room and you got a sense of the personality of the character and a personality of the nation that they were leading. And in Civilization 6, they sort of took a step back from that, but you still had the painted background, the map painting background, that again gave you a sense of the personality of the leader and again of the civilization that they should be tied to. Here in Civ 7, you no longer have that background. You just sort of have the leaders kind of just in the void, with the game itself in the background. And I think that that's stripping away part of that personality. If you had Benjamin Franklin in his office with, the globe of the world and the treaties and the colonial, or not colonial, the recently independent American flag, and you can give aspects of his personality, or Ashoka in his throne room with whatever makes him, his personality, makes him unique. I think that adds a lot to the character, and it just doesn't feel quite as, engaging, just having them there by themselves. The other thing too, by the way, I've heard some commenters say, and I think I agree with them, is it doesn't quite feel as personal when the leaders are no longer looking at you. Instead, they're looking at the opponent, and you're sort of watching these two argue with each other. It's not quite the same as a leader looking at you and saying, "How dare you declare war on me? Give me sheep, or else there will be war, whatever. Looking directly at the player seems to create a certain level of engagement that you don't get when they're facing each other. Another thing, I don't have a screenshot for this, but personas. Personas are back in Civilization VII, and I think personas are dumb. Personas are basically a reskin of a Civilization leader. So the one that we have seen is you have Napoleon, I think it's Imperial Napoleon and then Revolutionary Napoleon, which in my eyes is basically blue coat Napoleon and then red coat Napoleon. And with each persona, they come with a whole new set of abilities or traits, agendas. It's a new leader, but it's just Napoleon wearing a different coat from an aesthetics point of view. And I think that's really bad for two reasons. I mean, one, I think that with every persona you create, you are sort of chipping away at the strategic space that is available for actually new leaders. I would far rather that you introduce Charlemagne or Charles de Gaulle or Joan of Arc or some other French leader alongside Napoleon who has those same traits and abilities than if you create Red Coat Napoleon with those abilities, because it's allowing you to explore the vibes and the feeling and the appreciation of more of human history when you create those new leaders. So I really think personas are dumb. I don't like them. I get why they do it. It's a lot easier to create a persona than it is a whole new leader from an art department perspective. But I really do think they're dumb. And a little bit of a side note, but if you are going to do personas, what they should do is go back to the Civilization 3 thing. One of my favorite features of Civ 3, which has not been in any other version of Civ, is when you picked a leader, as you advanced through the ages, the leader actually changed their outfit and their look. So you'd have Abraham Lincoln in a chieftain's hat in the ancient era, or you'd have Genghis Khan in a suit and tie in the modern era. And I think that's a really cool idea. Seeing as the focus of this game is on going through the different eras, it would make so much sense to have personas and these reskins as just part of the leader you're picking as you go through the ages. That would be awesome. Because again, it creates more of a connection and a feeling to the leader you're playing as. And they're not doing that. Instead, personas are basically another leader you're picking, which I just think is dumb. I really don't like that. Speaking of, kind of tied into this, I'm concerned about the historical grandeur and that sort of that connection to history in Civ 7. This, for me, was one of the big things that just fell off in Civilization 6. Here in Civ 7, I've already mentioned some of this with like the leaders being disassociated from the civilizations. I think there is some, I think there are maybe some issues there. I think that you're going to lose part of the connection to history. That, in my opinion, is one of the most joyful things about playing a Civilization game. I know that's not so important for those of you who are just in it for the gameplay. You just want a fun strategy game. This won't really matter as much. But I remember when I was young, and Civilization 3 was one of the very first games that I played, alongside games like Age of Empires 2. And when playing those games as a young boy, I felt like I was connecting into history. And I felt like I was learning, in a very broad strokes, big picture, sort of way. I was learning about new people and new personalities and really tying into history and learning about, for example, Ashoka leading the Mauryan people, right? Or learning about someone like Jadwiga leading the Poles and getting a sense of her personality and the civilization's personality through a game like Civilization or AoE2. It feels like a stepping stone into real history, and that there's a value to these games beyond just the strategy game part of it. And I feel like the decoupling of the civs and the leaders is going to impact that feeling. I'm really worried about that element of Civilization that is just such a joy for young people who are getting into these games, and such just a feeling of comfort for someone like myself coming into a Civ game and being able to explore new peoples and new civs, and as well, kind of say hello to old favorites. We'll see. I don't know that that's going to be the case, but I'm a little concerned about it. And then finally, one other thing that I think I'm concerned about, I've just got to say, it is the cost, right? I do this for fun. This is a hobby. I don't really make money yet, anyway, off of YouTube. I don't really have a big audience for that. Don't really have any kind of sponsorships or anything like that. So just like you guys, I mean, I'm looking at a game and saying, wow, $69.90, $70 for just the base game. And then if I'm wanting to buy into that deluxe edition, that's another $30. And then another $30 on top of that for the Founders Edition. That's a lot of money, right? And I think that's a step up from what we're seeing other games, including competitors for Civ. We have Aura History Untold coming out, which is releasing at $59.99. And that $10 makes a big difference. That feels a lot more manageable and a lot more on par than what we're seeing here with the $69.99 out of Civ 7. This is a game that, honestly, if it's not, maybe if some people chip in some things or something like that and say, hey, go buy Civ 7, then I might do it. But otherwise, I think I might need to wait for it till it's on sale. Because $70 just to buy a base game, that's a little much for me. I certainly will not be pre-ordering right away. I've got to sit back and wait to see how things shake out. Is this going to be worth $70? I think it's a decision you have to make for yourself. I know that Civ is one of those games that many of us pour thousands of hours into, and it's definitely worth it for the amount of enjoyment you could get out of a game. But at the same time, I also know that Civ is a game that sort of gets better with expansion packs and maybe at release. Historically, Civ games have not always been the best. Ed Beach is the chief director on Civ 7, just like he was on Civ 6, which a lot of people liked. I personally did not vibe with. So for several reasons, I'm going to maybe sit back and wait on Civilization 7. Maybe until the cost comes down or something like that. But I will say this. I'll end on a positive note. One thing I really like about Civ 7 is that they are swinging for the fences. I want to give a shout out here in the Civ Fanatics forum to Byte, who's got this features thread. I'm going to pull that up right here. And he is listing out all of the changes and just everything we know about the game so far, which is really cool. And just describing things like the era system, they're swinging for the fences, and I love that. I love how they're trying to break up the monotony of the game. One of the problems of Civ has always been that it's typically the early game is a lot of fun, but then as the game goes on, you get into that mid-game, late game, it gets boring. You've already won, and you're just hitting end turn for another 50, 60, 70, 100 turns for the game to finally be over and for your victory to be confirmed. But games tend to get boring as the game goes later. And they appear to be attacking that with the era system, where as you enter into new eras, the map opens up and there are new things to explore. Civilizations appear or disappear as the game proceeds onward. Those kind of things are really cool. I also really love the diorama effect of the map as well. I didn't mention this too, but the minor tribes, the way they pop up is really cool, and actually a lot cooler than, in my opinion, the way you interact with the major civilizations. So I think there's still room for development and for them to kind of hit some really cool things. I think they've got some really cool stuff in their sights. Whether they hit that mark or not, we'll have to see. But those are my opinions on Civ 7. Finally, let me wrap up this video with one small bit of news, something we need to keep our eyes on in the future. Age of Empires 2 has an upcoming expansion pack coming out. We don't know exactly what this is. There's no info announced on it. But we've seen in the database this thing here called SteamDB Unknown App. And one of the things that's very interesting is that the most recent expansion pack prior to Victors and Vanquished, which I'm forgetting if that was Return of Rome or I think that was Return of Rome, was listed as DLC number 5. Victors and Vanquished, which came out fairly recently, was listed as DLC number 7. So whatever this DLC is, we are presuming is DLC 6, and it's been in the works for a little while now. So no idea what it is. Could it be a new expansion pack with new civilizations? Could it be something like an aesthetics pack that creates new regional skins for regional units, or new architecture sets, maybe new castles for all of the civilizations of the game? Who knows? We don't know, but we just know that something is coming down the pike for Age of Empires 2. So, I've done a lot of talking. That's the news that I think is worth reporting over this last week in the strategy game world. Let me know in the comments below. What are you interested in? What about this is exciting to you? What about this is worrying to you? Is there any news that's come out that maybe you're excited about that I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. For now, this is Iron Kaiser Gaming, signing off. Have a great one out there.